Okay, we'll keep a close eye for the bunny girl.
Roger. Among the Roger. Among the large headlines concerning Apollo this morning is one asking that you watch for a lovely girl with a big rabbit. An ancient legend says a beautiful Chinese girl called Chang'o has been living there for 4,000 years. It seems she was banished to the moon because she stole the pill of immortality from her husband.
对于现代性的考掘的这件事情，其实是很重要的，因为整个历史的进步，它必须要有一个进程。那这个进程其实完全是透过研究史料、爬书而去重新回到一个史观的角度去看我们的历史到底是怎么经历这些现代化的过程。未尽之役的展览，其实它基本上也是在这样的一个情形之下产生。它也从我们的典藏品里面找到一些对于台湾的一个进步的一个过程的史观当中的一种新的观点。
展览从1950年代美术太空竞赛与美援计划所驱动的各种文化外交活动，以3个相互交织的主题剖析当时历史氛围的复杂性。从现代艺术、工艺以及设计等方向进行分析阐述，并进一步讨论上述时代条件如何催生了现代家园的构想，并进一步形构了我们作为人的自我认知。这3个题旨分别回应了冷战如何造就了我们所体现的所谓现代性，就是我们如何感觉我们处于现代，我们是在一个现代的时间里。太空竞赛后的宇宙技术是在感知的层次，透过外太空摄影技术，但科技的成立带来了新的视觉性。嫦娥其实在很多我们的中国神话里面是月亮的形象，也是一个很重要在中华传说里面的一个缪斯女神。在一个科技发展的状况之下，李希齐与他的夫人诗人古月，他们认为登月这件事事实上是将缪斯女神的故乡就是除魅吧，科学化之后这个故乡消失了。陈映如透过这个利姆利亚人的这个视角再重新思考艺术时，他是提出这些白人男性艺术家都是外星人的角度来说，他们创作的艺术作品都其实是一个讯息。一方面他也同时并行了在60、70年代整个世界经历的很大的公民运动甚至屠杀的这些事件，来做所谓的史学批判的一个提出。Maria Taniguchi 她在研究的是在菲律宾马尼拉的吉布尼车，这个作品它在拍摄的角度几乎是像恋物癖般的在扫描这个车的感受，也是提醒观众我们要记录要观看到的是一个跟家跟物之间相关的一个视觉性。 视觉性如何建构了我们跟家庭、跟家屋、跟家屋里面物件之间的关联性。台湾战后的现代艺术家对于家屋的这个体现，一方面也延续着传统中国宇宙观对家的理解，特别最能呈现的则是陈其宽的这个5公尺长的这个阴阳2的这个作品。你可以看到他的这个投影视觉的这个传统中国四合院如何展开在其中。这个部分可以看出四合院中体现的是中国的人场概念，将内在的展开对照着水墨语会带出的一个家屋平行着大自然宇宙的对话。自由世界的美学网络则是一个美学政治的命题，但我们将重点不是放在美国文化外交主导的艺术史上，而是我们将重点放在台湾战后现代艺术家的能动性上，来铺陈艺术家们如何在当时诡谲的国际情势下发展出一段又一段的艺术史。
The exhibition features 2 case studies of how U.S. aid or U.S. cultural diplomacy supported the travel of Taiwanese art and craft around the world. The 2 key examples are the Asian Artists and Crystal exhibition from 1956 that was actually shown in Washington, D.C. first. In the case of Taiwan, there were 3 pieces: Lan Yiting, Zhou Junyong, and Ma Shouhua. What's quite interesting is Saying of Confucius, which is one of the crystals, is presented in advertisements by the Stunberg Glass. So what this tells us is that these crystals were actually sold to an American market, essentially mass-produced for homes. Now, the other case study that's in the exhibition is what Russell Wright, the American designer's relationship with Taiwanese craft. And the idea always was that the objects that came out of these craft centers were always this amalgamation of what an American audience might want and expect, but also certain indigenous craft techniques. In both cases, when you talk about Asian Artists and Crystal and you talk about Russell Wright, what you're looking at is how Taiwanese art and craft kind of was transformed by entering this international world and traveling through it. The contemporary works really are discursive partners for the modern works. They ask us to question how art histories are written, what gets written in, what gets written out. Erica Tan's, for example, Barang Barang, imagines a meeting between her mother, Fei Tan, and 3 other artists. And so in this meeting of female artists, she's actually, and presenting her mother's work alongside research on these other artists, She's really asking a question about how we write art histories. Part of that work is really the questioning of who gets remembered, when, and how, and by the same stroke, who gets forgotten. Projata Pontis's kitchen debate really actually show the enduring resonance of the Cold War in the contemporary, because what she has is basically a cauliflower in a refrigerator that calls to mind the mushroom cloud of the atomic bomb. So, you know, a work like that talks about the sort of persistent anxieties that come out of history. And so what the artworks do, really, the contemporary artworks do in this exhibition, is they talk with the modern artworks. And they're kind of reflexively engaging with this history that is kind of emerging.
在这一次未经之意的展览里面，除了有美术馆的典藏，包括跟其他非常多单位的借展的作品之外，里面其实也有当代艺术家透过他们现在的观点，重新去看这个现代化过程的历史，怎么用当代艺术的角度重新的去诠释它。其实它产生了一个对话的关系，基本上就是在谈这个当代性的重要。那这个部分其实它会很深刻的去跟我们当下的一个社会观点去做一个连结，而不仅仅是呈现原有的艺术样貌而已。
What is that reflective moment that is possible for us in thinking through the ways we understand history or we understand ourselves in history? Perhaps the most important question that comes out of this line of questioning is, how do we imagine ourselves alongside other people? How do we imagine human history? How do we imagine being international? And I think that this question is perhaps more important now than it's been in the last 10 years, given everything that's happened with the pandemic and also what you've seen as trends of what people call deglobalization. So this is really an opportunity to think about a specific moment in history that was very international, that was rethinking what the world is, and on the scale of humanity, on the scale of the planetary.